You've heard me say it before, and I will say it again. We here at Matt's Minutes enjoy all things superhero. Okay, maybe not all things, but pretty much everything superhero related. So, and you've heard me do many videos about why I love Nightwing and Batman. Why Batman, or talking about Batman's batarangs, or other things like that. So, you know we love superheroes. I even did a video where at one point I explained if I were to have any power, I would have either, well, the Force, or some kind of like ghost powers, which I think would be really cool. You know what one power that I really would not want to have in the real world? Wolverines. Yeah, that might come as a surprise to some people, but just hear me out. I do have some logic behind this, and I really would like to get into this so more people can relate to it. So, do you have a minute to talk about old Wolfie? Hello, all my friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Matt's Minute. So, as I mentioned, Wolverine is not a hero whose powers I would want in the real world. And I think there's a couple of reasons why, but before we get into that, I want to actually explain what his powers are. At least the main ones. He's kind of had some thrown in there and then they're taken away, and we're just, we're not going to be discussing those. We're going to be discussing when you think of Wolverine, what are his main powers? And for those, we have animal senses. So he's really good at smelling, he's really good at hearing, and he's really good at tracking. He has a degree of enhanced strength and speed as a result of these. And he has a bone claws in his hands. Yes, originally they were bone claws before he got the adamantium skeleton. And the final one that you're probably most familiar with is his healing factor, which allows him to recover from pretty much any wound. And I'm sure you've seen all of these in the various X-Men movies, so I won't go too in-depth into describing these, but the main one that I want to talk about today is his healing factor. We're going to be talking about all of them, but the healing factor is the main reason why I'm like, I don't know about that. So, without any further ado, let's get on into the reasons. So, the way Wolverine's healing factor works is, let's say that he gets shot. The bullet goes right through him, he can still feel it, and then his wound closes back up. Well, that sounds pretty cool. You're not dead from the bullet wound. But keep in mind, Wolverine can still feel that. He still feels getting shot or getting stabbed or whatever happened to him. He gets a blow to the face, he feels it. And then on top of that, he then has to feel his body grow itself back together really, really quickly. And it's not like once he heals from the wound, the pain goes away instantly. No, he can still feel it for a little bit. So, if he's consistently getting impaled or stabbed or shot or anything like that, he has to feel every single one of those and keep going. Which is great for Logan, because apparently he doesn't care and just can keep on going through it. But in the real world, doesn't really seem all that great to me. I mean, sure, being able to regenerate an arm if I lost it would be great, but feeling that would be a completely different story. So there's that to think about. The other side of his healing factor is that it gives him a prolonged life. Not immortal. I did check. He's not technically classified as immortal. He just has an extremely long lifespan, but theoretically eventually would die. The problem with that is he can't really form any close relationships with anyone because he's just gonna outlive them. He's kind of forced to be by himself for his entire extended life period, and maybe that's just me, but that doesn't sound like that great of a deal. Like, I think what makes life great is the connections you have and the friends and the family that you have as well. And to outlive every single one of them by a long shot? No, I think I'm good. Now, something else to consider outside of just his healing factor would be the enhanced senses he gets. Now, that sounds great, if you needed that, but keep in mind that humans have not as great a sense of smells of hearing, seeing, or smelling as other animals. And I don't know, I feel like, you ever been overwhelmed by smell when you're like walking through a department store and there's just perfume and all this stuff everywhere? Imagine if that was heightened and you could smell all of that and everyone in there and differentiate every single smell while hearing more than the average person, which in a mall is pretty darn loud from what I can remember. And yeah, it sounds great on paper. And if you're a superhero, I'm sure that comes in handy. But for day-to-day life, that might be a little much. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I don't see that as being all that useful for day-to-day life. The last thing we're going to talk about is his bone claws. The reason I'm using the bone claws instead of the adamantium claws is because his actual mutation is bone claws. The adamantium is a result of Weapon X experimentation on making his entire skeleton made out of a fictional metal called adamantium. So, given that it's a fictional metal, it's highly unlikely that that would happen in the real world. So, bone claws. Not as cool as adamantium. Number one. Number two, not as durable. And three, could you imagine just shooting like bones out of your hand, knuckles? Like, number one, that's painful. And you would have to use your healing factor every single time that you did that, so you could feel it coming out and then healing back together. So, that's one thing. Number two, how useful are bone claws? Like, maybe if you just, like, got one out and were slicing some bread or something like that, maybe, like, you wouldn't necessarily need scissors. But they're not as sharp or as useful as metal. I don't know. I'm struggling to find how many uses his bone claws would actually have in the real world. So, I didn't come up with that many because it's just, it's probably potential bias. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of, could you think of other uses for his bone claws? I would love to hear it. Now keep in mind here, I'm not saying Logan is a bad hero, and I'm not saying his powers are bad. Quite the opposite. I love Wolverine, and his powers are actually really cool. He uses them to great effect, and is actually a very, very strong member of the X-Men team. So Logan does a great job with his powers. My argument is, in the real world, if I were to have Logan's mutation, I really wouldn't be all that pleased with it. At least I don't think I would. This is all hypothetical, and clearly I don't have a mutation that lets me shoot bones out of my hand. But, I digress. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I appreciate all of you that did. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really does help us out. Got an idea for a minute? Please leave it in the comment section down below. We get to them all the time. Every time that there's a comment about one, we get to it. I promise. I make sure of it. So thank you guys so much. And I will see you guys next week.